Oh, occasionally. He did the voices of other things. I don't think he did dialogue voices. Well, not
one or two. I mean, it's a strange because with the Cybermen, by the time they went into colour, they also got the people inside with mics built in, so they do the voices as well.
Yeah, well, they employed actors in those.
Yeah.
Didn't do much for their careers.
Are we all ready?
Yeah, Kevin.
Thank you. It's really nice to see you. Talk to the backgrounds of people who are on your career thus far. Just to Doctor Who, that's why you're here, I suppose. But we're interested in you as an actor, presenter, entrepreneur. You grew up in Blackpool, I think, in the Blackpool area.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't born there. My parents moved there when I was 3, and it's quite funny. You know, people talk about the memories that they have, and my earliest memories. I think I've got memories back to certainly earlier than 1.
Really?
Yeah, they're only snippets, little bits. But I remember moving to Blackpool, so it must have been a very significant thing. I was only 3 then, so I've got very clear memories of Blackpool. Those memories have never really gone away. Every time I go to Blackpool, which is rare now, and I've got no family there to go back and see, but every time I go back, the memories trigger back. And the town hasn't changed greatly. It has in the central area, but the parts that I live haven't really changed greatly. There's a few more houses, but the trams are still the same, well, slightly more modern, but they still occasionally run the old ones and things, and the railway stations are still the same. The memories just come flooding back, and it's really quite extraordinary.
Is it true you phoned up the local rep in Barry and Thurston and asked them for an audition for a job?
Yeah.
Just like that?
I phoned them up and I said, look, I've got school holidays coming up, and wondered if there's any opportunity to work at the theatre. And they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to act. So they said, well, come down and have an audition. So I did an audition, and they gave me a couple of parts.
It's amazing. Just like that.
Yeah. Don't forget that at that time, Weekly Rep was coming to an end. I mean, I did 2 years there. But it was coming to an end, and it was a very parlous survival route for the companies. They didn't have a lot of money, and they didn't pay people a lot of money either. So if they could get a student along and pay him £5 a week to appear in a play, that was an extra character on stage. They could do a slightly bigger cast at a very small additional outlay. And when I was there permanently, which was a couple of years later, I went back and permanently joined the company. And I did 2 years there. We got grants from we got a grant of £1,000 a year in the second year I was there from the Arts Council, which was matched by Blackpool, by Barrow in Furness Council, which was matched by Vickers Armstrong. I can't remember who had to match what, but it was only £1,000 a year from each. So there was £3,000. That paid for 6 actors for the year, because the salary was you got paid £9 a week. So you less than £500 a year, £3,000. That gave you 6 actors for a year at the theatre, and the company was very small. I think there were only 7 or 8 permanent members, plus the artistic director.
Your first play was The Rainmaker.
That's right. Yeah,
and you played Sheriff.
Yeah, you've done some good homework. yeah, I did. And interesting, I broke my arm. I'd gone and done this audition, and I was playing rugby, and I shattered my wrist, and had to have an operation on it, and I just had the operation because I lost the use of my thumb. The injury was, it was a compound fracture, and it was quite bad, and it ripped through the tendons to my thumb, and so I had those repaired, and my arm was all covered in plaster. So I actually performed my first professional play. I had one totally inactive arm that was kept out of the sight of the audience most of the time, heavily bandaged throughout.
No, I'm interested about you were doing rep in Barry and Furness, and then for a period you studied as a teacher.
That was before. Yeah.
That was before. But did English and
I did English and maths, yeah.
You taught in Hackney for a year?
Yeah, for a year. Yeah, hated it.
Why did you study to become a teacher?
Two reasons. First reason was that by going to college, I didn't have to do national service immediately, because it was still national service was still on. And as it so happened, 3 weeks before I left college, national service stopped. I knew it was going to, in fact. We knew that about 3 or 4 months earlier than that. But I didn't have to do it at all, as it happened. That bit deferred me out. I wanted to defer that because I've been away at college at boarding school till I was 18. We had a cadet course. I just thought, I just don't want to do that straight away. I'd rather go to college and do something serious. So I did. I went away to college and was supposedly trained to be a teacher, but actually spent most of my time running the Dramatic Society.
Oh, I see, at the school. But you didn't really enjoy that job as being a teacher, though. It wasn't for you.
No. You know, I've never had I've had 3 days off work since 1961.
Wow.
That doesn't mean don't forget I don't work all the time, so I might have been ill when I wasn't supposed to be working. But for them, I've never taken days off work. I think 3 times. I had very bad flu and I missed the programme of Blue Peter once, and I had I think I got measles or something, German measles, when I was in rep, and I only missed 2 shows even then. So 3 days since 1961 I've been off work, but prior to that, when I was a teacher, I probably had 2 months off during that year.
Because you weren't enjoying your job and it was affecting
If you're ill,
your
I'm not
health.
going in. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Well, no, I don't. I think it was purely an attitude. I wasn't ill enough to not work, but just not well enough to feel great, so I didn't go in. And I mean, people do that. And if you're unfortunate enough, or rather, if you're fortunate enough to do a job that you love, which is, I suppose, not the majority of people, but if you're fortunate to do that, you don't get out. Or even if you are, the job's more fun than being ill.
When you were a teacher in Hackney, you got a telegram asking you to go back into Bowen.
No. I took the plunge before that. I handed in my notice and left, then spent 2 months, I think, wandering around London seeing agents, trying to get work, didn't get any. Then got a telegram. I'd already taken the plunge. I didn't go from a job to a job. I committed myself and I said, no,
so
I'm
you
going to be an
stopped.
actor.
You wanted to
Yeah.
stop being a teacher and
Yeah.
become an actor
Yeah.
properly. This is something you really committed to.
No, it was definitely that way around. I mean, it's nice to think that I was coaxed away from teaching, and not so. I decided I'm not doing this. I'm going to be an actor. That's what I intended to be. That's what I'm going to be. And I spent 2 months not earning anything on the dole, trying to get a living and trying to be persuaded by the labour exchange that you've got to go and teach. You must. I said no. I'm not a teacher anymore. And as it happened, when I finally got that job, I could actually lay claim to it because I had a permanent job for 2 years. So I had acted at the end of that first time in rep. I'd acted for 2 years, which was a year longer than I'd been a teacher. So I could lay claim to acting being my profession.
This was as a junior male lead, was it? In
yeah. It was called juvenile lead. But in rep, you played as cast. It was not. The designation wasn't as clear as all that, because you have in a theatre like that you've got to play all sorts of things. I mean, one week I'd play a 12-year-old and next week I'd be playing an 80-year-old. I mean, that's
it's good
true.
experience as an actor.
Oh, sure, but I mean, how good or bad are you going to be? I mean, for the most part you're not going to be terribly good. Every now and again you'll play a part that you're ideal for, and I suppose in 96 plays, maybe if I said 10, so less than 10%, no, slightly more than 10%, but if I said 10 of the 96 plays I was well cast in, of which probably 5 or 6 I was wonderfully cast in, that's about as good as it gets. The rest were, well, it was okay.
Casting is important.
And there were some that I was
Yes.
probably absolutely diabolical, because how can you be good in all sorts of things? You can't be that versatile. Rep makes you versatile. You play all sorts of things. You play farce, you play serious drama, you play Shakespeare, you play Ibsen, all of these things. You play Agatha Christie. There's this whole range. And so you're playing modern, you're playing period, you're playing various periods, you're playing comedy dell'arte style, you're playing outrageous farce. All of these are totally different styles of acting, and you can be good at some of them, and you can make a good stab at all of them, but you'll probably be lousy in some of them, and I'm sure I was.
It's experience though, isn't it?
Oh, and unbeatable. And think of the experience of learning. Sometimes you have a massive part
Watching
in
other actors
every
in the
play.
roles as well.
Well, absolutely. You learn from everybody, but you don't always have the lead. You don't always have a massive part to play. Sometimes you do, but you have to learn every single one in 1 week, in 5 days, really. You start rehearsing on a Tuesday. You're on the following Monday. So you've got a full house, and Monday's a very technical day, doing the dress rehearsal and all that. So it is that sort of work and that sort of way of working. Doesn't half concentrate the mind, but it means that you have a wonderful memory for learning scripts. Sadly, I've lost it. I can't do it now. My memory's terrible. Who are you?
I've got a good memory actually.
Where am I? No, I've got terrible memory. It's dreadful. It really is dreadful. It's the short-term memory, and I think it's probably things like Blue Peter that ruined it eventually, because again you had to learn very fast, but you only had to learn it for the amount of time it was needed to regurgitate it. So you learn it, you pass the information on, clear the mind out, let's get on to the next thing. And I think that means that you end up, not with a scatterbrain, but you end up with the kind of brain that says, I don't need that anymore, it's gone. So unless you really have to file it away for future use as a very important thing, you won't retain it, you won't remember it. And I mean, I walked in today and I looked at face and oh yeah, I knew 1 or 2 faces, but it's probably 5 or 6 times I've seen you many times now. So I mean, I remember you, but often you see people, you have seen them once before, there might be a fake, I have no idea where. And it's not rudeness and it's not thoughtlessness from my point of view, it's just the way my mind now works. I can't train it any better. I'm too old to do that.
You left Barry and Furnace and you went down to London. You were in the chorus at the Palladium, was that?
Yeah, that was my first job. The first job was on tour with a repertory company from Wimbledon. We toured with a play called Witness for the Prosecution, and I played one of the witnesses in the court. Good play.
Good play, yes.
Agatha Christie.
Good play. Agatha Christie.
Yes.
Yeah, but it made into a very good film. With Charles Lawton, that's right, and Marlena. We had a lady called Patricia Oh God, let me get her name wrong. Pat Driscoll. She was famous at the time in the early 60s.
Patricia Driscoll.
No, not Patricia Driscoll. She was Robin Hood's lady, wasn't she? It's Sonia Dresdel. She was called. And she was the lead. She played the Marlene Dietrich part. Anyway, yeah, I did that, and then I did another leading part and went down to Westcliff and did 2 weeks in a play there. I think that was another Agatha Christie. It was a terribly difficult part because if you play the inspector, which I did, I must have been older than 22. There aren't many police inspectors 22. And you have to. The plot doesn't help you. You know, you don't have people feeding you the link idea. You're always onto new questioning lines and so on. They're terribly difficult parts to play. So I did that. Yeah. And then I auditioned for the Palladium and got a job as a singer in the chorus.
And you were on TV in a few things like Z-Cars and The Saint. And
all of the shows that were reasonably popular during the 60s I did. I think The Saint, Gideon's Way, Red Cap, Court Martial.
That's a good showcase as an actor to get on those kind of shows.
Yeah, there were only small parts. There was nothing of any great consequence. Dixon and Dock Green, World of Worcester. I mean, all those shows that were popular. I did play in all those, so I had a reasonable CV from those. And before I started getting a couple of leads, which really made a big difference eventually.
You were with Nicola Paget in her first leading role.
And my first leading role. First television.
This was in a play based in Blackpool.
Yeah, I played the beach photographer, and she played a beauty contest contestant, and he chatted her up, and it was a nice little piece. First screen snog, great.
You did something called The Villains after that.
Yeah, that was again. It was only 1 episode. Good actors in that serial as well. It actually was a series about villains. It was not. It didn't have regular characters running through it at all. Do you remember Mike Pratt?
Yes.
Mike played my brother. And he's a good guy, Mike. I knew him until he died. I knew him very well.
Good actor.
He was a very good actor. And Randall Hopkirk, deceased. Actually, that wasn't his best. He was better in other things than that. But
they never are they?
No.
The things that you're famous for,
it wasn't
never your best work, ever.
It wasn't. He was a superb actor. He really was. And he was a very popular guy. And suddenly he died of cancer, which was... I mean, he did smoke a lot, so maybe that was it. But anyway, that's it.
You went up for... I think director Richard Martin, you went up for an audition to try and get into a part in the Web Planet, I think, initially.
Yeah, whatever it was called. It was the one that had giant butterflies.
Yes.
And things. Well, what they wanted were actors who could move, and because I'd been in the chorus at the Palladium, the choreographer said I could move like an elephant. I thought, well, you know, at least I can move. You know, maybe it would work. Maybe this would be a good idea. So I went along to see him, and he'd seen the Blackpool play, and which had only just been shown. The Villains still hadn't been shown, I think, at that time. But he'd seen me in the Blackpool play, and he said, "What are you doing coming on for this?" I said, "Well, you know, I need a job." And he said, yeah. He said, I mean, I shouldn't say this. But he said, you're far too good for this. He said, you're a better actor. I don't want to give you the part. And I really wanted the part because I needed the money. You know, I was broke. And he said, no, I'm not going to give you that. He said, but I promise you that when I'm dealing with actors, you know, and there's a proper acting part, then I will think of you. Well, I mean, I took that with a pinch of salt because that's what directors say to you every time when they don't want to say, get out your crap.
He was true to his word.
But he was, absolutely. He said, no, this is... the first time he was directing where there was a part that he could offer that wasn't a regular character, and there was this Morton Dill. It was a reasonable part. It was sort of, I don't know, 7 minutes of screen time and one scene, but a good scene, and I had a chance to enjoy myself in it. He offered me the part. I played it, and at the end of the, you obviously know the story, but at the end of the recording, Verity Lambert and Dennis Spooner was the story editor at the time, and he'd written the next serial, the one that was which was the Meddling Monk. Was that what it was called?
Time
Meddler.
Yeah.
With Peter Butterworth.
Yeah. And they came up and said, look, will I go and join them in Studio 3, which was the pub over the road? So I did, and they sort of took me on one side and said, I don't know if you know, but Jacqueline Hill and Bill Russell are about to leave the programme, and we wonder whether you'd be interested in taking over. Of course I said no. I mean, well, an offer, you know. So I went to see them the following day, and they talked it through with me, and it was a fait accompli. I got the job. So it was on the strength of Morton Dill and on Richard's niceness and generosity in being, you know, being as true to his word that I got that, and I've never forgotten that, and I don't think I've ever repaid his kindness. But
did you have much to do with Verity Lambert? Did she come onto the studio floor much?
Oh yeah, and she was very nice to me. Strangely enough, I have no rapport with her at all now. I've tried to speak to her on occasion, but not recently, I must say. But there's nothing there. You know, she doesn't respond in any way. I don't know whether I upset her with something I did. I can't recall that I did, because she didn't stay on the show much. After I joined it, she moved on almost immediately.
Lives, which was a fine series.
Yeah.
She's more of a film producer now, isn't she?
Oh yeah, she's hugely successful. Oh yes, absolutely, hugely successful, and very good at her job. I liked her. I thought she was smashing. I was very grateful to be given the part. And I mean, Dennis wrote a super character for me, but it sadly never really appeared.
What I liked about that character was he often stood up against Bill Hart and all the characters.
Well, that was the idea, but in many of the shows it didn't happen.
His decisions.
Yeah.
Which is quite.
It wasn't a yes man.
No.
That's right. It was no.
What was Bill Hart like to work with? Because a lot of people say different stories, and it's difficult to work with. He was a racist, or was just.
He's all of those things, but I got on with it very well.
And you always take people as you find them yourself.
Absolutely. He was extremely generous to me. I mean, he was always very, very friendly, and he'd take me for lunch a couple of times a week over to Bertarelli's on the other side of Shepherd's Bush Green. And he was just very generous. We repaid it in kind. Once a month, we'd sort of invite him over to the flat. My wife and I, we'd go out and have an Indian meal or something. You know, I mean, but he was very generous, very kind to me. He liked me. He liked the character. He liked the rapport that we had on screen. I mean, it would have been better if he could remember his lines, but he was fine. I got on with him fine, but he only liked 2 or 3 of the directors that we worked with in the year that I worked on the show. With them, he was fine. Other people, directors, would come in, and Bill would be very, very awkward.
Because his health was failing a bit then as well. So
yeah, and his memory was going. So I mean, I think he knew that he was becoming rather inadequate as an actor, which is a very unfortunate and sad thing. You know, he couldn't remember his lines, and that used to make him more and more defensive, if you like, which came out as aggression. He's an aggressive guy, and he had a lot of gripes, a lot of chips on his shoulders. I mean, I think he felt that he'd never been fully given the credit that he deserved as a performer, and that whilst other people he had an awful chip on his shoulder about people like Ian Carmichael getting on and being, you know, but I mean, Ian was a very good actor and did some wonderful things, and was totally different from Bill. Bill could never have played the kind of parts that Ian Carmichael played. And I don't think he could see that. Sorry, I worked with them both. Yeah, yes. Yeah. So he was very interesting. I never had not one word of problem with Bill all the time I worked with him. I did watch other people having terrible problems with him. It was, if he didn't like people, then that was really, he used to be very nasty to some of them. I remember when we did the Myth Makers, and Max Adrian came and played King Prior, and Max was gay, which is also Jewish. I suspect that both of those things rankled against Bill. Yeah. But Bill knew him, and then Max took me on one side one day. He said, "Peter," he said, "why won't Bill talk to me?" I said, I don't know, man. I had a pretty good idea, but I said, I really don't know. He said, "I know him very well. I've known him for years. He won't even speak to me." He wouldn't. All the time we did the show, he did not speak to him. So for 4 weeks, they never had a word of another hello, another goodbye, unless they met on the set when they actually had to speak to each other. He didn't say anything. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, you can bear grudges, but I mean, that's going a bit far, isn't it? It really is.
There were a couple of stories you did that I really liked on Doctor Who. One was the Celestial Toy Maker. Yeah. Your character was great in that because you really had centre stage. I mean, William Hartnell was hardly in the story, so you became in effect the leading man.
Yes, it was super for me, and I mean, strangely enough, you never realised at the time that that's how it was working out, because Bill's presence was still very strong. In fact, he was a disembodied hand, I think, throughout most of it, playing this game, because the toy maker had vanished. Billy wasn't very well, and he needed a rest, and he was given a rest.
Was there a rumour that they might replace him?
Yeah, they were trying to write him out. It was the first attempt to write him out, I think, on the Celestial Toy Maker. But we've now made the CD of it. Have any of you heard it? Yeah. You came down to the thing. Do you like it? Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's super. It was a very visual story, and it still works even as a radio play.
Because the imagination.
Yeah. I think it works. I think they're very good radio plays these days. It's a great pity that the video is missing, but actually, I think that the shaky sets and everything else detracted from a lot of the early Doctor Who's. The things that made them good were the scripts, and the scripts come through as being remarkably good.
A lot of strong scripts in the early Doctor Who's.
They were brilliant. They're terrific writers, and I mean, I think that it was a script-led series rather than a character-led series. I think the scripts were tremendous. The stories. I mean, John Lucarotti's The Massacre, I think, was brilliant, fabulous script.
Good writer of those.
No, but they all were. Bill Ems, they all were good writers. I mean, Bill Ems wrote one that I really hated, which was the one with the Jumblies and the Dravins. And I liked the girls, but I didn't like the
Galaxy 4.
Didn't like thank you very much. Galaxy 4, that one. Yeah. I mean, I hated that, but I discovered later, and I think I got on record as saying, well, Bill Ems didn't write my character and all that, which was true. He didn't, but he wasn't told until the scripts were in that Bill Russell and Jackie Hill were leaving. So he had to adapt his script, which had been accepted, and the storyline was all going to go ahead. He had to adapt it for me. Now, that meant that I had to be captured by these ladies, when actually it was Jackie Hill who had been captured, and wasn't have been particularly strong and able to fight them off. It was a ludicrous story.
Yeah, you became that character.
I hated that. I was embarrassed by it. But that wasn't his fault. It wasn't Bill Ems' fault. It was actually a very good script, if you think about it. It was super ideas in it. They all are. I mean, I thought that it was wonderfully script-led. I really liked the Myth Makers. The one I didn't like greatly was the Gunfighters, and the director was mad. I can't remember his name. Rex Tucker. And there was another one. Michael Leeston Smith directed one, and that was quite good. Now maybe it was the Toy Maker he directed.
So you had Michael Goff in that, superb actor.
Yeah, he was excellent. I'm trying to remember which one Michael did. But Michael Leeston Smith was an extraordinary director. Everyone warned me about it. I got on fine with him. So did Billy, actually. And he sort of turned up on the set wearing jodhpurs and stuff, because he used to, as soon as he finished rehearsal, he'd shoot off to his polo ponies and go and play polo. He wasn't a rich man, but he had all his money didn't go to his family and his mistress and his children, but went to his polo ponies. And so he had two. He couldn't afford to be reckless like the rich guys could and lose sort of half a dozen polo ponies during the course of a game. But he would dote on these, and he used to turn up. He looked like Max von Stroheim, you know, the jodhpurs and the riding crop, and he used to wear cowboy hats. He was quite extraordinary. But I can't remember which was the one that he directed. It might have been the Toy Maker. But
what was Douglas Camfield like?
Oh, smashing good. Dougie directed the first one that I did. and I knew him, became very friendly with him and his wife Sheila. Yes, he was very easy to work with. He directed, I don't know if he directed all 12 of the Dalek Master Plan.
Most of it anyway, so.
He certainly directed a lot of it. I know he cast Jeanie Marsh.
You got Peter Butterworth back.
Yeah,
meddling mum
yeah,
again.
yeah. No, Dougie was very easy to work with, and he was a very generous director. You know, he would leave a lot to you, but he knew precisely what he wanted. Well, what impressed me, and don't forget, it was the first continuous thing in television that I'd done. So you started to take note of what the director was doing with the equipment. You know, how he was moving his cameras, how he was using his cameras, and so on. And Dougie was immensely skilled. He was a lovely man, a very good director. Very sad.
The casting on yes, it is very sad. The casting on that was very strong. Kevin Stoney, very fine actor. Jean Marsh.
Yeah.
It was a.
And Kevin was a very nice guy as well. Extremely nice. I worked with some great people in that. There were some lovely actors in the serials that I did. I mean, Max Adrian, I've mentioned, I liked a lot. Francis de Wolfe, who played Agamemnon in the Mythmakers, also fabulous, great fun.
He's a Marinus as well. Francis de Wolfe. No, he was.
Oh, he was in. Oh, I see. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So don't throw things at me like that. Ball the curveball.
What part did you want to leave the series? Was it because the scripts were getting, well, your character was...
I didn't want to leave. No,
so
they said that...
You were written out?
Yeah, I was written out. Yeah. They weren't very kind. I mean, they were kinder to me than they were to Maureen O'Brien, because she came back from holiday, the summer break. The series was off for the summer. We came back and we had the Mythmakers to do. And we came back and she was informed at the end of the Mythmaker she was written out. In fact, I don't think she knew until she saw the script for episode 4, which we got on the second week, that she was written out. I think that was the first she knew.
Well, that's not very
so
nice.
when were you told about?
I knew a month before that they weren't going to renew my contract. I mean, it was only a year's contract, and it was policy. So they said, but it did seem to be, because they did change. They said that we don't want the companions to be there for longer than a year, and they never were after that. They moved on. Michael Craze and Fraser, and, you know, it was sort of rolling. They didn't keep the same companions.
You had a period of a year or perhaps a year and a half out of work then, which must have been tough.
Yeah, I did. I went by a few nice directors, people like Jerry Blake, allowed me to do a couple of episodes of Z-Cars. I think Dougie Canfield did an episode of Z-Cars that I did. Then directors were going on to the colour training courses, and I did some of those. But essentially I was out of work. Yeah, I drove trucks.
It must have been soul destroying. I mean, having
It was
been trained as an actor, and not being...
It was pretty depressing. I mean, I could have gone back into rep. I could have tried to find rep work. But when I decided that I would do that, I couldn't even get that. I mean, there aren't an awful lot of jobs available, you know. And, I mean, there were things like they were doing a season in like they do in Regent's Park, and I thought, well, maybe if I can get into that. And I went and saw them in sort of February or March for the coming season, and didn't get that. And I was at a pretty low ebb at that time. It was getting very severely near the point where I was going to give up the business. And then, out of the blue, Blue Peter sent for me.
This was what, just 67 something?
67 in, I don't know, when was it, November? Must have been, wasn't greatly before, so it was either September or October they were auditioning, and I joined on November the 11th, I think it was.
You were there for 10.5 years, so you must have enjoyed it.
Oh, it's terrific.
I mean,
I did want to leave that. I mean, when I left that was at my instigation. I reckoned I'd stayed too long, and so I left that of my own free will. But no, Doctor Who was sorry, we don't want it anymore.
People think of you, they think of Blue Peter, obviously. I suppose anybody over the age of 30, I'm 42 now, I think of John Noakes, Brad Singleton and yourself hosting that series. Because
interestingly, you know, I worked longer with Leslie Judd than I did with Valerie Singleton.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah, but most people remember the other trio. Yeah.
That was a very strong, still is, a very strong educational series. What I liked about that series particularly was they didn't talk down to the children. The children were addressed as equals, which was unusual for a kids' TV series. But also they used to, I suppose it was groundbreaking then, now it probably wouldn't be, but they'd have things like you'd be changing a baby's nappies, whereas Victor would be
yeah,
building a brick
yeah,
wall.
do the roles differently.
Or
Yeah,
John
yeah.
would be doing the cooking. And
Yeah.
I think that's very clever how they did that.
We were the first programme to do that. That's
We
for
were.
sure. And we were quite innovative in all sorts of things. And the non-talking down. I mean, children are young adults, and as long as the content isn't bewildering, then you talk in exactly the same way to them as you would to adults. That's how I think.
Probably now, but then that was the first series to actually address children as adults.
Well, it was the first dedicated children's programme of that kind. I mean, there wasn't anything like it. There weren't magazine programmes, but Peter was the first magazine, really. You know, everything else is a spin-off of that idea. Started as a 15-minute hobbies programme, spread into something wider than that, and apart from things like, I suppose, Nationwide, but Nationwide didn't come on stream until Blue Peter had been going a long time, because the technology for doing a Nationwide wasn't available, which was a magazine, a news magazine. There was no such thing as a magazine programme. Now you've got the sort of daytime television, the morning stuff, Good Morning on ITV, the Rich and Judy thing. I mean, that's a magazine programme. The items are longer than I think is ideal. And if you're looking at a half-hour slot, I don't think that the format's beatable. It's perfect. And Blue Peter is still running 42 years on.
Yes, it's a strong structure, isn't it?
That's a frightening amount of time. It really is. That must be mainly because the personnel have changed regularly. It must be mainly to do with the formula, the format.
It works.
Yeah, it does work. Still work.
Did you actually record those live, or were they?
You know, they were recorded, but yes, it was a live performance. They were recorded for the future. They weren't put out as a recording.
I see.
They went out live.
So, what do you have like an auto cue then?
No.
So you had to learn your lines, so to speak.
Yeah. Auto cue was available, but Billy Baxter wasn't at the time.
She was quite. Billy Baxter's has quite a fearsome reputation. A lot of people used to be quite scared of her. I think. Was she a formidable lady?
Yeah. She was a control freak, really. She ran the show. Her ideas were the dominant ones. Her ideas were the ones that were fully enforceable. You stuck by what she said. You didn't. There was no flexibility in her. I found that difficult. But we only work with her in the studio, and it's a half-hour programme, and most of the time you just go on with the script. There's very little that was controversial. But the times that you'd fall out with her would be, you know, when you wanted to do something slightly differently, and she had very fixed ideas on how it should be, or she'd written something particularly twee, but she wants those precise words said. And you know, ultimately, I suppose it's up to us to do it. And if we change something perversely, then she'd make life pretty miserable for at least a month.
What was her argument for not letting you use an autocue?
Because she said you couldn't change autocue quick enough. You can now, because it's all computerised, but you couldn't change autocue quick enough, and she liked to alter the running order of the programme sometimes at the last minute. I mean, we'd have notes after the dress rehearsal, and the notes would start from her. She would have her planning meeting upstairs following the dress rehearsal for about a quarter of an hour or 20 minutes, and then would appear in the makeup room at round about 4:45, and we're going out live at 5:05, and give us all the changes. And there'd be some bits would be script changes, some bits would be running order changes, and she reckoned that autocue couldn't handle those changes in the time.
How did you handle that? You've memorised the whole show.
Then we had to handle it.
They changed.
We had to handle it.
There's a time.
It wasn't only us. Don't forget, anything that's changed also applied to all the camera crew. They all had to all their changes. Floor managers, lighting, because the thing suddenly is out of sequence and it's in a different sequence. So everybody used to go through half an hour of purgatory before the show went out, mainly due to her perverseness. Not strictly true. There were certain things that had to be changed. Sometimes the show was too long, so the bits have to be cut. Cuts aren't too hard, but altering running order and altering sequences and taking whole chunks out, that can be, it can be quite a difficult thing. So yeah, she was hard to work with in that respect. And if she got a down on you, then you'd find that your schedule became really rather unpleasant. early calls for this, late calls for that. Doing a film that you really didn't want to do and she knew it.
It's not giving you dangerous stunts.
Well, no, I mean, that would never have bothered me. It was just that she was a control freak and she wanted everything done her way.
There's one thing I must ask you about. There was one occasion where I think John Noakes was making some cooking for everybody, and you made this thing called a baked bean and dumpling soup. I don't know if you remember this. But the idea was that Valerie Singleton and you would eat it afterwards after you'd made it. Valerie refused to. I remember you saying, "I hope it tastes better than it looks, John." Your
memory's better than mine.
It looked
no memory at all. Everything John cooked was revolting.
You must have an affection for the series, though, because even when you left the series, you came back and did special assignments, these kind of special things.
That's not affection, that's money, they paid me. I mean, they were serious. That wasn't an affectionate thing. It was. I was very pleased to be given the series.
But you left because you wanted to leave, but you still came back from the
but they were different things. They were, you'd go and do an in-depth look at some famous person's house, it was Kipling or whatever, or we did a series on rivers, and it took me to Singapore, and went fishing on the Tweed, and all these sort of things. So they were extended Blue Peter films. A Blue Peter film lasts 5 or 6 minutes. These things we go away for a week or 10 days and make a really proper film. And they were proper documentaries. They were precursors of all sorts of things which have followed on since. I mean, all the things that we did on the programme, like the foreign travel and all that, that was at a time when people didn't have foreign holidays to the extent that they do now.
Yes.
The big package holidays hadn't started, and we went all over the world. I went to 27 countries. I mean, it was an unbelievably brilliant job. And following on from that, doing the special assignments, it was really quite an honour to do those, because they were quite prestigious programmes. So I mean, there wasn't really an affection for Blue Peter that kept me doing those. It was, this is a darn good job. I want to do it. That was one that I did 3 series of special assignments, and that was one of 3 sets of programmes that were given to me after I left, because they gave me Stopwatch, which it was a sports programme which we did from Manchester. There were 5 series of that, and we did a series called We're Going Places, also from Manchester. 3 series of that, and those came directly out. Well, Crufts had already started. There was an involvement with Crufts from 1976. I'd done the first insert into a Crufts programme. Then 1979, I think, I started doing Crufts, doing the Obedience Championships, and then they added agility to that, and it was a separate programme. And then about 1990 or thereabouts, I took over doing all the breeds as well, so doing the whole show, and I'm still doing that.
You did Babel as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a good programme. That was one of my favourites. We did 39 programmes of that. It was a very funny show. I think it was probably intellectually too clever. It required the audience to work a little bit to appreciate the humour of it. But we had some wonderful people on it. People like Willie Rushton, Graham Garden, Bill Oddie, Tim Brooke Taylor. I mean, funny, witty, intelligent people. And it was great. I loved that. I chaired it, and it was difficult. I wasn't as clever as any of them. I didn't go to university, and they all got degrees coming out of their ears. And though I never felt unable to actually handle some of the things that happened in the programme, at times I was very aware of how sharp and clever these people were. But I thought it was a very funny series, and I wish it had gone on. It was a great disappointment that it didn't.
It was a good series. Does having trained as an actor, does that help you being a presenter, do you think?
No, it goes directly against being a presenter.
So it makes it more difficult.
Yeah, and Johnny Noakes had the same problem. You start off as an actor. If you're like me, you're quite happy to play different characters and to just be that different character for as long as is necessary, and to try out different things. Johnny, on the other hand, he had to play a character. He could never play himself, and he had to play a character. He hid behind the character. He was very exposed as himself. So when it came to presenting, you have to forget the acting skills, which I was able to do eventually, not quickly. But you have to stop acting and stop, because there's a falseness about acting. You're pretending. You have to look and sound absolutely natural. And I think I achieved it eventually. I certainly think I've managed it now, and I should have. But it wasn't easy. Johnny, on the other hand, had to find a character to play.
So he was
So he invented John Noakes. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
The opposite of what you were doing.
Yeah. John Noakes is not. Johnny is a much quieter, more reserved, quite funny. Sometimes very intelligent, sometimes plain stupid. And I like him a lot. But the John Noakes character, I like less. I don't mean I find I have a problem with it, but I think he's much nicer than the guy that he portrays. But that character that he portrays is an invention. That is not Johnny being real. That is Johnny playing a character called John Noakes.
Now, about 8, 9, 10 years ago, you turned down the chance to narrate the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Is that right?
No. I could have played the narrator in the Rocky Horror Show at Leicester, and decided against it. Well, because I had other things that I thought would get in the way of it, and which might have. There were other work things around that I wanted to pursue. I suppose it would have got me back into the theatre. The trouble with coming back into the theatre, and particularly after doing the kind of work that I've done over the years, at a time when it wasn't hugely lucrative to be very successful on television. I mean, believe me, it wasn't. There was never a lot of money in it at all. And I'd never really built up the kind of reserves that were going to allow me to spend 6 months trying to make a career in a less well-paid area. And it would have cost me a lot of money to have done it. And I didn't have the money I felt I could spare at that time to allow me to do it. So that was another reason why. You have to balance your career very carefully. Sometimes I think I wish I had done it. Though I don't think I want to do the Rocky Horror Show. I thought it was great. I saw it when it opened at the theatre upstairs at the Royal Court in London, and then I saw it at it was on at a cinema in the King's Road, and then moved to another cinema in the King's Road. Went to the ABC eventually in the King's Road, but it moved around. And I saw it 3 times then, and I saw it once. Then they made the film much later, and I saw that and thought that was great. Then it became a cult thing. And now if you go and see it, it's not anything like that first show. The first show was fantastic. Now everyone in the audience is playing the parts of the people on stage, they're shouting the lines out, they're throwing rice in the back. To me that's a jerk off. I don't like it. I don't want to do that. And I don't think I would have enjoyed that. Now the audience might, but that really is not. I liked it as a show in its original form, and that's how I prefer to remember it. So there's a third reason why I didn't do it.
Can you envision a time in the future where you might take up acting again, or do you think?
Yes, I can, but I'd have to be offered the right things. I've just played the part actually in a new sitcom called The Office, but I'm playing me, unfortunately. I'm playing me in the early 1980s, so my hair's dyed, and I'm doing an old-fashioned training video. And these people in the office are watching it, and it's a very cheesy thing. It's deliberately so. It's really.
So you're spoofing yourself.
I'm spoofing myself. Yeah.
Now you did this special Blue Peter night with Valerie and John a year or so ago, and just recently we've seen I Love a 70s Christmas. There's lots and lots of talk in the papers and the media about you doing a Blue Peter for adults.
Yeah. Well, it's an idea, but as I said earlier, don't believe everything you read in the newspapers.
It's a very good idea. Actually.
Well, it is an excellent idea, but it's with the BBC and it has not been rejected. But it is not a fait accompli. It's not happening yet because they don't think we found quite the right vehicle for it. Now I can't see. I talked about magazine programmes. I can't think of a better format, but that is not sufficient. And they aren't rolling with it yet. But we've got interest from outside the BBC, so maybe we'll take it there. I don't know, luck of the gods, but I think it's a good idea. It wouldn't be Blue Peter. What I'm suggesting is a grey-blue rinse version, you know, which is for older people, but a magazine, because they don't exist anymore. There aren't any magazine programmes for everyone, where, you know, there's a few items. Most of them you might like, one you'll be very interested in, 2 or 3 you'll think are okay, and 2 you'll think, oh, what's that for? but that's fine. That's a magazine. If you buy a magazine, you don't read everything.
No, you pick up the ones
You
you
pick
read.
the bits that
Yes,
you want.
it's true.
And a magazine program, I think, is the ideal formula. But there you go.
You've done a few audio commentaries for some of the missing Doctor Who stories
Yeah.
now. How do you feel about the fact that a lot of your work's been destroyed? Not just on Doctor Who, but on Z-Cars or whatever.
Well, I mean, I'm not nostalgic. I don't keep things anyway, so I wouldn't have them necessarily. Had they been able to be retained? I mean, video recording, domestic video recording, wasn't really possible until VHS became the standard around about 1980 or 81, something like that. I remember demonstrating the first domestic video recording about 1973 or 4 on Blue Peter.
Yes, I was going to say, you actually should probably be the first programme to show it.
Yeah, either us or Tomorrow's World, but I think it was us actually. And it wasn't possible to record these things, so no one made video recordings. The only people who did were the program makers. And 2-inch tape is very difficult to store, it's very large, very cumbersome, and a lot of it was wiped. They used to wipe tapes to reuse them. I mean, it was expensive stuff. So they had wiped most of them. I'm disappointed, I suppose, now. It would be quite nice to have them, but I mean, I've got a cassette of the Ark, and to be honest, I've never looked at it. I've never seen it.
Not one of the strongest stories. It's a shame that one exists and the others don't.
Well, that, and I think the gunfighters exist, and that one's
Yes, it does.
But I mean, you know, I mean, it's rubbish. But so there you go. I mean, yes, those exist. The meddling monk, the time meddler, exists, and that, well, I think it does.
Yes, it does, yes, entirety.
Repeated.
And that was a great story.
Do you envisage doing more audio commentaries in the future if you're asked to do this?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I've only got one more I can do, and that's
Savages.
We could do the Savages. I'm going to do the Dalek Master Plan.
We can release that on audio. Marvellous.
Yeah, it'll be a four CD job, is that? At least.
Perhaps I'll pay more money for that then, maybe.
Oh well, I mean, it's however long it takes. You know, they pay quite reasonably.
Have you started that? Has that been done?
No. Mark Ayres will get round to it at some point, and then we'll fix up a schedule and do it. It's not certain I'll be doing it, but I think I am. I know Mark wants me to do it. So who else could? You could have they could have Gene Marsh could go and do it, or Nick Courtney. But nobody else.
And they're not in it all the way through.
No. I mean, I'd be the most appropriate person to do this.
Would anybody like to ask Peter Purves a question?
Yeah. Or this. Go on. Well, firstly, you talked earlier a little about Verta Lambert. You also had the distinction of, along with Bill Hartnell, being the only person who worked with all three of the first directors, Innes Lloyd and John Wiles as well. What do you remember of them?
Innes I liked immensely. I mean, Innes went on to be head of drama at the BBC, or head of serials, then head of drama, and then various other things. I liked him a lot until he fired me, to be quite honest. He was the last of the producers that I worked with. And he didn't renew the contract. John Wiles I got on with extremely well, except in the Dalek Master Plan when we had a fit of the giggles and he went berserk. And I've never seen anyone go berserk. But the more outraged he was that we had, I mean, how do you not laugh at Peter Butterworth? He was corpsing all over the place. So was I. So was Bill. I mean, it was a joke. It was a total shambles. About episode 7, and it was all going horribly wrong. And John went potty, and the more angry he got, the more I laughed. But no, he was a very nice man. I actually liked him a lot.
This is the Christmas episode you're talking about, the Feast of Stephen.
No, that wasn't the one that. No, I think
it's 10. I think when the meddling monk comes back.
Yeah,
one of the ones that does exist.
Oh really? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't know, but I mean somewhere in the middle of the series. But I mean it was a 12-parter, and it was. I think it had gone way over budget. There were all sorts of things that must have been ramifications that were causing John a panic, and he thought we were just mucking around, but we weren't. Occasionally you do get a fit of giggles on there, and we did. So yeah, but I mean I remember he was a very nice man to work with, and he produced some of the best serials. He did The Massacre, and he produced.
It's very factual.
Yeah, it was terrific script. Yeah, very good script. And that was another one where I think actually that was the first attempt to write Billy out.
He was very good in that, though,
Yeah,
wasn't
but he was not there. He played two parts, didn't he? He played two characters.
But he was very good
Yes,
in those two
yes,
roles.
he was. Yeah.
I think he's a much better actor than he's given credit for.
Oh, he was a good actor, Bill. I mean, he was very humble about how he got the part, because he played the old tramp in The Sporting Life movie.
Oh yes, Liz Anson's picture.
Yeah, and he sort of thought he was the club scout, but wasn't really, but liked to think he was. And they weren't sure whether, Verity and Sid Newman weren't sure whether Bill was going to be the right person. They were humming and hawing. And he sat them down, he managed to persuade them to come and see this film, or they had been to see the film, one or the other. And he said that was what got him the part. You know, he said, oh, I desperately wanted it, desperately wanted the part of the Doctor. And they were shilly-shallying around. He said, but then they saw me as the old tramp. He said, that got me the part. And I remembered him as being marvellous in it. I've seen it since, and he wasn't, you know. There were an awful lot of very iffy bits about the performance, because his accent was slipping. He was supposed to be a North Countryman. I mean, Bill couldn't do North Country to save his life. And you realise how much the accent slipped. But at that time, everybody's accent was rotten.
Memory cheats, doesn't it?
Yeah, Richard Harris's accent wasn't great in it either. And,
Yeah,
that's what got him the
Richard
part. Anyway,
Harris.
that was interesting. Yeah.
Anybody else got a question for Peter?
Did you ever meet the very first Blue Peter presenter, the late Christopher Trace?
Oh yes, I used to play cricket with him.
What was he like?
I knew him before I joined Blue Peter. He was a very nice guy. He started. He was a very sort of upright, middle class, and older than us guy. Played cricket, very good cricketer. He ran a team called the Television Travellers, and when I was in Doctor Who, I was invited to go and play with them, and I played for several years with them. It was a nice. We played in nice clubs around the southeast, and he was extremely pleasant. But he left the programme when I joined, so I didn't meet up with him then. But he ran a club in Chelsea. He had a club, and I went there a couple of times, saw him there. So yes, I knew him quite well. It's rather sad that his career took a nosedive. I mean, he left Blue Peter under a bit of a cloud, and consequently he decided that he was going to be a writer, because he managed to form a liaison with a guy who produced films, and he actually conned him, I think, and he was conned into writing. Well, no, he wasn't conned into writing. He wrote a film script, but nothing happened with it. It was a total disaster, and he put money into it as well. You don't put money into films that you're working on, that's stupid. And he lost it all, and because of that, he lost his club. I think he'd already lost his wife, and had already gone pear-shaped because of his affair with somebody else. And he had a fairly miserable time, and his career never picked up. He never was able to take it up again.
I think he went into engineering.
Yes, he did, and he worked in a brass foundry in Aylesbury, and he had a very bad accident there. Brass casting fell on his foot and removed his toes, so that finished his cricket. So he didn't have a very happy life eventually. So rather sad, and he died of cancer. About
59, about 9 years ago, I think it was.
89. 89 or 90.
89.
Yeah. Well, I think it was later than that.
92, I think it was.
Later than that, yeah.
Any other questions?
How did you get on with Jackie Lane?
Fine. I mean, okay. I contacted her about a few months ago to see whether, because she now runs a voiceover agency.
That's right.
And I thought it would be a good idea to see if she would be interested in having my tapes and handling me. She wasn't. Now, that wasn't an unkindness. She was delighted to hear from me, but she said, well, you don't live in town. She said, almost all the work I get, she said, is for, they want people immediately, can someone come this afternoon? She said, if I'm trying to contact you in Suffolk, the odds are that you won't be able to make it anyway, which is quite true, I wouldn't. And I'm not going to move back to town just to do voiceovers, so I mean, it hasn't developed into anything. She said send me some tapes, and I hadn't, so I shall do that in the future. I haven't seen her for years.
I spoke to her about a year ago. I keep trying to get her to come along to one of these events, and she absolutely refuses. She said that she did an event in Manchester with yourself, and she said something about you both made a pact that you'd never do another Doctor Who convention or something.
I forgot, she was at Monopticon, was she?
Yes, I believe. Yeah, I believe she was. Yeah.
Do you know, I've forgotten that she was.
It's the only one she ever did, wasn't it? I think?
Yeah. I keep trying to persuade her
She's
to
a nice lady.
come along.
Nice lady.
Certainly, Maureen O'Brien doesn't seem to have anything much to do with
No.
Doctor Who. Was that
Well,
what
she.
you
I
did?
mean, if you think about the way she was
Well,
got rid of,
yeah, you
it's,
can't blame her really.
I'd
I'd
be
see her.
pretty cheesed off with that as well.
Steve's quite persuasive. We've had Jean Marsh, haven't we? At
Mm.
our events.
She was talking about the giggles in the master plan as well.
Jean's lovely.
Yeah.
I adore her. She's great.
She used to carry
She's
her
married
lunch
to
in
John.
her belt on.
She was married to John Pertwee.
Yeah.
Any,
Tell you any of that? No.
Yes,
No,
she did.
well,
She
she
did it.
I
Aaron,
think the
yeah.
one story about
Yeah.
the seeds, you know.
And just to ask about comedy in Doctor Who, particularly because more than certainly later series, it was more serious. But you had the Mythmakers, you had the Gunfighters, and the Christmas episode of Feast of Stephen, which were very, well, I think very funny. You don't like the Gunfighters, I think it was very good. But did you see it at the time as, oh, we're doing comedy now, or was it more for part of the course you didn't really think of it as being any different to the serious sort of stuff?
I think as far as the Gunfighters were concerned, we were aware that it was quite funny, possibly. But I didn't find it very good. I didn't like the script. I didn't like my character in it either.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
didn't
he
like
did get
the
very
director.
forced. That wasn't much of a role for Steve.
No, it was
one.
crummy,
It
wasn't
was a bit of a, I quite see what you like.
Yeah.
difficult to play as well with the scenes and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, the song was
Yeah.
lousy as well.
Yeah,
It was supposed to be, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That's
but it was just I just didn't like it. I wasn't comfortable in it. It's like you see, you get that in the series anyway. Certainly when you've got different writers and everything else, you're not going to be right for everything that you're required to do, unless they're writing very precisely for you. And then whilst they write quite precisely for the Doctor and a couple of companions, they don't necessarily write for the individual. And that one really had borne no resemblance to anything I considered Stephen was, and that's really why I disliked it. It was a pity. Yeah, but yes, I mean, we were aware that it was amusing. We were also, I mean, Celestial Toymaker had some wonderfully funny bits in it, so it was good stuff. But no, I mean, for the most part, it was a drama serial, and we were aware, we viewed it as a piece of drama and a play rather than a specific genre like comedy or anything else. Yeah.
Was that how Doctor Who was viewed at the time in the BBC? Was it drama? Was it children's?
It's called serials. Yeah.
It's supposed to be educational as well, wasn't it? That's why they had the historicals initially, because they was trying to educate children.
I don't think. No, I think it was always meant to be entertainment. I mean, you mentioned education earlier about Blue Peter, and basically Blue Peter was supposed to entertain. It wasn't meant to educate. If it did, that's a bonus.
It did both.
Yeah, but that was a byproduct.
Yeah.
The aim was to entertain. It wasn't. We were trying to put together a program which was full of entertaining items. If they educate you at the same time, then that was not the intention. It's a byproduct.
A happy byproduct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, for the things that you've watched on, like Blue Peter or even Doctor Who, taking your interests to say, oh well, I want to look a bit more into this.
Sure.
And it's achieved its purpose in a way because you're.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean the spin-offs are legion,
Yeah.
but the intention was to produce entertainment. Education was not part of the brief.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. What in Ipswich?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to get some ties into the area, I suppose. Having moved to Suffolk, I saw, in fact my wife saw in the paper that they were advertising for a board of management for the Repertory Theatre, which had closed owing a fortune well over a year before. And the aim was to get a new board of management who would get the theatre up and running as soon as possible. We opened on the 1st of February this year. I've been very pleased to be part of the board of management, and I've enjoyed what I've done there. And we think we've got the right person in charge of it. We think we've got the right team running it, and we think it'll be a success. Whether or not it will be, I don't know, but we think it'll be a success. It's a marvellous theatre in Ipswich. It's and you've a town of that size. So it's about 140,000. Ipswich. You've got to have live theatre. You can't have a town of that size without it. I don't think. So it was to renew my interest and my contacts with live theatre. That's why.
I wondered, one of my favourite bits, what's the only bit left now, I think, of the Celestial Toymaker, is when you're hopping over the electric floor. led by Peter Stevens.
Yeah.
I don't see him in anything. I suppose he's no longer with us now.
I don't know.
Because he was.
I honestly don't know.
I mean, in the later Doctor Who, but not after your era. But I haven't seen him since then. Yeah.
No, I don't know whether he's alive or not. I have no idea.
But he was
a nice cast. He was playing sort of Billy Bunter type.
Wasn't there a problem over that legally?
Yes, there was. Yeah.
He was very close to the character.
Yes. The character was called Cyril, and
the
Bede, I mean, I don't know whether the Bede made an ex gratia payment to the Billy Bunter Trust or whatever it's called, and that's not a garment, by the way.
Any other questions?
I know it's a specific moment 35 years ago, so I'm probably asking a bit much, but there's the Christmas episode of Dalek Master Plan.
We weren't in it, and I don't even recall it. So I'll probably go on. Ask the question. I won't remember it. I'm sure.
It was infamous in fandom for quite a long time because right at the end, Bill comes in with a tray of drinks and glasses and says, "Do you remember when we landed at the police station? It was Christmas." "Oh yes, it was." And you all have a drink. And he turns to the camera and raises a glass to the camera.
Yeah,
incidentally, a Merry Christmas to all of you at home. It's in the TARDIS, and you and Gene Marsh are there. And a lot of people speculate, was this completely ad-libbed and you couldn't stop him? Or was it planned in rehearsal and done?
I have no recollection of it at all. I don't even remember that. I didn't even know that we were in that episode. I have no idea. I have no recollection of it whatsoever. In fact, I have very little recollection of the Dalek Master Plan as a whole. It was such a mixed up bit. I remember the first 4 episodes vaguely, but that's it. No, my memory about it is terrible now. But I mean, I don't think I only saw about half a dozen of the episodes I was in when they went out, and haven't seen them since. You know,
don't mind watching yourself.
It was. I wasn't free to watch. I'd be doing things. I'd be out. I mean, whatever it was on a really awful time. Saturdays were busy days for us.
You didn't have videos in the 60s. No videos.
No. So I mean, you never saw it. In fact, it was only at the one in Leicester. The last one I went, no, the one before, and they showed me, or was it Manopticon? No, I think it was the one in Leicester. And they showed me the Morton Dill sequence. I'd never seen it. I'd never ever seen it. So I now have. I thought it was quite good as well.
Any more questions? Well, I think for the time being, Purves, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.